will recognize, and I'll try and give you where the location was, and we'll share some of the stuff that's on there. And then coming forward, I got a couple surprises at the end for you. So if we're all set. Okay, the centennial in 1955. Of course, Cochranton became a borough on April the 5th in 1855. So 100 years later, of course, this is a centennial. I could only find a couple of places between 1855 and 1955 that they actually celebrated the community. 1916, there was an Old Home Days. There were parades that dealt with the fair and other options, but I don't think there was any celebration. I looked back 50 years and I couldn't find anything there. Not to say that there wasn't, but there didn't seem to be. Centennials and stuff following the Second World War become very popular. A lot of the communities will do this. As you'll see when we go through this, we're talking about Cochranton, but in a way we could be talking about Sagertown, or we could be talking about, Blooming Valley or something, because they adapted to that. So to start off with, 1855, the centennial symbol up there. The covered bridge was probably the symbol of the community that separated Cochranton from everybody else. And of course, in 1954, we finished when we consolidated our school system and built the new school. So this celebration was in June 19th through the 25th. Go ahead, Bryce. Of course, the main street, it's easy to you never get lost in Cochranton. We only have one red light. So at the main intersection there, this is looking down towards town, and the decorations are all up. Believe it or not, I have some of the decorations. I collect everything. I have some of those decorations, actually. But you'll see underneath there, the red light is the symbol that was on there, and there were several of them that went up and down down through the community. We had our own headquarters, which was the old telephone office. It was a really small little building. It was about maybe 9 or 10 feet wide and ran back probably about 25 or 30 feet. They sold the centennial booklets. There were hats and stuff that everyone had. You could go there and make donations along the way. But that's kind of what the main street looked at that time. Of course, we got up in the airplane and go around. I always love this. This is the most important village in southern Crawford County. Nobody can dispute that. It's a great thing. Whoever came up with that, I wished I had, but that's a great thing. Of course, we're coming in across the bridge, looking through the middle of the town, which shows you, this kind of orients you a little bit. The H.L. Moore Company is the big up in the upper corner. This is where the fairgrounds is. This is where the baseball field was at that time, which would be about where the horse ring is now. It's out a little bit farther than that, but that'll kind of give you an idea where it's at. Pearl Street, of course, Adams running straight up through and all the little communities. Cemetery is way up on the top, and you can see Sugar Creek coming down before. This was going to be an expensive undertaking. In April, well, a little bit before, it was actually in March, but into the April meeting at the Borough Council, they wanted to do this. And right here was the stopper. Now this is 1955, remember, okay? That's almost 10 grand. And there was some considerations, but they thought the borough, we just can't do this. This group of businessmen, John Oakes and Ray Gill and Ed Hubbas, along with, there was several others, but these are the officers, finally had a meeting and said, we're gonna do this. John Oakes at that time had a hardware store in town. They also owned the Rojo Cho, which was out on the Coney Lake Road. And he had another place in Cuba at the time. And he said, well, we'll figure out, if not, I'm gonna cover it. If not, we'll figure out how to cover the money. So they got everybody together. Now, what happened is you hire a company, which this is the company which they'll hire, and they're out of Ohio. And they're gonna bring everything. They're gonna bring all the costumes. They're gonna bring the script. They're gonna be here to run the show. And they're gonna tell you how to raise money. The booklet itself that I have from them is probably about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch thick, okay? That's how detailed it was. And there was gonna be a job for everybody. I mean, everybody. Everybody was going to have a part to do it. There would be sales of equipment and sales of pieces, so everybody would have something to do with it. This gentleman and his wife will come, and they're going to be the directors. They're going to take care of, we'll show you some pictures of them. So between now and June, which is from April until June, they've got to put this whole thing together and get it ready to go. So the first thing when they get here is they divvy out all the parts. Okay, everybody's going to be in this pageant, and you got to have a costume to be in it, or you could make your own. So these are some of the costumes up and down the street. And the other thing was you have to be very visible. So when you would go into any of the businesses here in town, sometimes they'd be dressed like this, with the idea like that somebody from out of town was like, what the heck's going on? Well, we're having this, we're having this, we're having this. This costs this costs that. Would you want to participate? So here they are coming through town again so people can see them. And so one of the first things that they did, which was a fundraiser, is you were not ladies. No lipstick, makeup the whole week, okay? Had to buy a badge, had to do a bonnet, wear your bonnet, and you had to have your badge with you. Gentlemen, we will grow beards or mustaches or whatever you can muster, okay? Or if you don't want to do that, you can buy a yellow button, which was called the chicken button, and you could get out of that. Now there's going to be consequences if you don't do that. So first off, they kicked this whole thing off, and this is a horse-drawn hearse, which was from the community many, many years ago. And they had a ceremony on the front street. Again, there's the headquarters to kind of give you an idea. We're standing just about where the grocery store is now to kind of give you an idea where we're at. And so there's a better shot of the hearse. And they had little caskets made up for lipstick and the razor and all that kind of stuff. So this was a ceremony that went on to kind of kick off the celebration. Here's the chairman, we said, John Oakes, and his wife, Margaret. And there they are in the car. And the gentleman on this side is Lucian Lido with the white beard there. He's the Burgess, okay? Now the Burgess is the mayor, all right? The way it was designated years ago, deciding on the side of the town, the mayor's was not the mayor, he was the Burgess. If you were a mayor, you would be from a bigger city like Meadville or Erie or whatever. So our distinction then was the Burgess, okay? A Burgess and a Senate council. Now, 2 queens were going to be elected. The Miss Cochranton, and now this is different than the Miss Cochrantons that we have now. This was just for the Centennial, and the Miss Tri-County. So how do you get money for that, girls? All right, you sell tickets. For every ticket you sell, you get a vote. And so that's what's going on here. The girls, now this happens to be at the old school. They're inside the what would have been the elementary school. They're inside, and here's the girls and the gentlemen going down through and contributing to it. And you might recognize the names there. I'm going to kind of let you look at the names, but there might be a few names that you recognize from that. But that's how you went. Now, what was the idea to be the Miss Cochranton or Miss Tri-County? You got a trip to New York. You got a 2 or 3 day trip to New York, and they won't leave until August or September, but they have an itinerary, they get a free hotel and all that kind of stuff. So there was a little bit of monetary there. But they're going to be the fundraisers. They're going to raise a lot of the money that we need to have. Now this is inside the brand new school. Now remember, the school is brand new. 54 would have been the first year that they would have gone in the fall of 54 with the graduating class of 1955. So this is up on the stage, all the girls, and here they come down through, which was a no-no, of course, if you went to school there. They're walking with their street shoes on the gym floor, but they're going to get away with it, and each one of the girls has an escort. And so there was a big pageant at that, where again, there was no talent or any of that kind of stuff. It was just a way to get you to come out, and you had to pay to get in there, of course, and of course that money all went in the kitty also. And these are the 2 girls that won. And there they are. So they were the ones, they were the top vote getters, and they sold the most. I don't know what the numbers are. That's been lost to history. Okay? And of course, then they were crowned eventually on the first evening of the ceremony. They were being crowned, and all these are local people that all have a job now, and way down to the little kids. Everybody in the little kids, we even have they have a job to do as far as that part of it goes. So, for my part, this is where the history comes alive, all right? So what they want to do now is we want to tell the history of our community, starting way back with the Indians and taking them right up to basically the Second World War. So they start going through all the barns and the carriage houses and everything, and they start resurrecting some of these carriages and stuff that were from many, many years back. High wheel bicycle, this was one that was from the community, the McFate sent this. Wagon, we didn't have any covered wagons, so we made one, okay? We went out to East Mead and we borrowed their wagon, which was their fire wagon, and that will be used also in the production. Model T, okay, and the Cottermans, and they're of course involved in the car business here at Community. And again, May and Ed Hovis, they're all dressed up, and this is their ride. I mean, this is top of the line for them. This is really nice, and Hovis. And they even get a baby carriage for her. All the accessories, for the most part, came local. They started going through everybody's attic, whatever. Hey, I've got a so-and-so, I'll bring it in or whatever. And so here's a couple of them getting together. A couple of these carriages I've been able to find in the community too, so, which is kind of unique because back in the 1850s, 70s, 80s, they're traveling up and down the front street, and now in 1955, they've returned again. So these are going to be part of the pageant, and they're also going to be part of the parades that we're going to have in the community. Now I mentioned, if you didn't buy those badges, you got yourself into a little bit of hot water, okay? Because we have a Keystone Cop, we have the Keystone Cops, and we have a judge. And this is on the corner, right on the very corner, right where the bakery is today. There's some furniture and stuff on that little corner. They're almost to the corner. They went and built out of rough cut wood a hoosecow, which is a little jail. And it had a door on it, and if you did something bad, well, you're gonna spend some time in jail, and everybody in town going around the red light's gonna know it. How do you get out of jail? The theme, money. Money, okay, you're gonna pay some money to get out. So here's Jack Moore, who knows what he's done. So they wound him up, but they're gonna haul him off there and whatever. Chief Coyle's not even, he is the police in town. Makes no difference. These guys take over. So Chief Coyle is probably gonna spend some time in the Hooskow too. And we stormed could we show this today? Come to Cochranton. But this was actually their poster, and it said on the bottom of it, wanted. 10,000 people would come to see the Cochranton Centennial. But a lot of fun, and everybody turned out to watch while this stuff was going on. And they would announce that Judge Fulkerson say, well, I think Wednesday night at 5 o'clock we're going to have some, so everybody would turn out to see what he had in mind. We had a band, okay. This is a band wagon. This is originally would have been a horse-drawn band wagon, and it would be horse-drawn for that. And these are guys all from the community, okay. And during the whole week, on different evenings, they would come out and do a little concert. How good it was, that I don't know. I was only 3 years old, but it was probably great. But they would travel through town, and they would go around the community and stop in front of certain businesses or at the corners and play a couple of numbers. They also were in the parade, and there were other things that they showed up in. You can see they all have some kind of an outfit on, which again was supplied by the Rogers Company. Contest for everything. This was just one of the best ones. This is the King and Queen of Freckles. Okay? We don't even talk about freckles and stuff anymore, do we? No. So those are the kids who are in, and this is Pat Patterson, who was the local, was in with the Ford dealership at the time. It's surprising when you watch some of the pictures how many convertibles there were in town, of all makes, Fords and Chevys and Buicks and everything. There were convertibles. We didn't have a problem with putting people in convertibles. Now we're going to take you down to the fairgrounds. Pearl Street is going to be behind us, okay? Just to kind of give you an idea. This is the framework that they started out. A handful of guys, I think my dad was involved with this, came together and built this. This is the set for the pageant. So let's go ahead and show you how it develops. And there you see they got it all draped now, okay? These are speakers, which will be the sound system for it. This is the main stage. There's an organ up in there. There's a background in the back. I don't have any pictures of that. But this would be about along Pearl Street, along the edge there, almost where the sewage lift plant is, right along that. They built it right along the back of it. And these were the people. They also, part of the deal was, these are portable bleachers that they brought in. Now this thing goes on Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, okay? So we're having people from all the other communities that are coming down. Again, they're gonna pay, you can kind of see, this must have been a colder night. It looks like they're all kind of draped up there a little bit, but everybody would come in. And of course, this happens after dark. So it's not gonna start until about 8:30, 9 o'clock, and it's gonna run for about an hour or a little over. It starts out with history coming alive, and they start out with a grand thing, and the trumpets blow, and the sound goes, and all these people, again, remember, all the performers you see are all Cockerton people. Kind of remind that as you're going down through, all going to be. Each night the queens get introduced again, so they come out and make their grand appearance. Look at all the flags and stuff that are around. It just goes on and on. There's people at the top of these towers, and there's an organ back in here, which Ed Hildebrand will play most of the music for it. So we start out with the Seneca Indians. So here's the first one. We dress all our people up. We look like authentic Indians, and we didn't live in wigwams, the Seneca Indians. But again, we're molding this so that Mid-Seneca community. Here are the Cochrans, okay? Joseph and Thomas, they're the Dixons, okay? Bob and Maurice. And they come out and they have a monologue with how the community was started. And of course, Joseph ends up with a portion of what is the community today, and he's a surveyor. So the gist of the story is his dad, thanks for giving me the property. It's so nice. I'm laying out of town and I'm naming it after you. So that's kind of how that starts. Then we move ahead to the pioneer families. Being a farming community, we didn't have any problem. We even have cows in the promotion. They probably have names and pedigrees, so they're part of it. As you can see, they're with all the beards and everything. They're part of the opening. We're coming here to settle this land, and they go on and on and on. We move ahead. Of course, the school system starts in the 1840s, but becomes incorporated in 1855 as the Cochrane school system. So we have a school teacher, and we have somebody did something bad, so we have a dunce cap, okay? And the storyline again is early figures, and there's spelling and spelling bee and stuff like that. And it becomes quite comical. And most of the kids are probably in the 10 to 12 age group, all right? So they get a chance to ad lib. Now, if any of you have performed in any of these kind of productions and stuff over the years, that you do it numerous times, after the first one you get creative. You start adding a couple lines, and you add a few more here, because you want to be the star, or, you know, when I say this, everybody laughs. So that, I'm sure, went on for each evening as it advanced. This is where they kind of step out of character. This is, again, the toast to the past. This is Burgess Lee with his back to you. And the guys up there are actually the council members. And they'll step out of character for a minute. They're forming their community and talking about that, and they'll step out of character for a minute, and they'll offer a salute to Cochranton in 1955 for 100 years, and they all raise a glass and whatever. That kind of is the formal part where the borough actually participates at that point. We talk about the Civil War. If you've been to some of my talks, we had guys from the Civil War that were members of the Bucktails that were killed at Gettysburg in battle. So we talk a little bit about them. It's kind of not descriptive as we would say, but again, they're using the horse-drawn hearse that was here probably in the 1890s to 1910. The gay 90s, entertainment and that. Here comes the band again to entertain us. A couple of surreys with all the horses. Now remember, you've got to coordinate all this so that they come in at the right time. So we've got animals behind the scenes that we have to get coordinated, get the horses and get that buggy around here and switch that buggy out or whatever. So it was kind of an interesting coordination of effort from back of the scenes. Bustles, bikes, and mustaches, which is our gay 90s things. And these gentlemen, their wife is taking them home watching the Can-Can Girls. He's gonna not go do that. This guy here, he just can't get enough. And all members of the local community. Revenuers, sure. They actually end up going around the parade. They've got a mule that they've got, like they've been miners, and they're going to go through the community with their pack mule. And so they have a still that they end up doing here at the end. And then we talk about the major fire at that time that they're interested in is the 1928 fire, which will eliminate from where the First National Bank was down to right where the Times office, almost right to where we are today. So this is that was our big deal fire at that point. So a little comedy and a little seriousness. And of course, at that time, you remember, it's been only 10 years since the ending of World War II. Now think about what's happened. Most of those GIs that left have come back now, and the community has grown, not only population-wise, but also with things going on. The guys that came back are now married and are starting to have children. The community is starting to be, the businesses on Front Street now have changed a little bit, but there isn't a storefront on the Front Street that isn't open. Our veterans have started the American Legion Post, and there was probably over 100 of them that started. I don't know exact figures on that, but so the World War II veteran was being now indoctrinated back into our community. So we kind of end that portion with them. And one of the last things that goes on here, just to kind of give you a perspective, once they raise the flag, there's this deafening boom and these bright lights, which is what? The nuclear bomb. And then the last part of it is all the actors do what's called, they do the wheel of progress. And they go round and round and round, and they're circled around by the scouts and everybody else. And that's how each production ends that evening. That's the end of it. I think it lasted a little about an hour-ish, but it's like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night now. So this is kind of, and we don't have all the heavy lighting and stuff that we had years ago, so you can imagine somewhat the lighting was like at that time with incandescent bulbs and whatever, but that's how it would end each time. Again, this is Helen and French Sensabaugh, and they were the ones that coordinated it. They came and actually stayed in the community. They became very, they went out, every night they had some place to go to dinner. There were a lot of home cooking types things that came to them. Ed Hildebrand photographed, most of the photographs, I can say, I think all the photographs you actually saw, I think, are Hildebrand photographs. There was a volume that was about probably 2.5, 3 inches thick that I have now that acquired, plus lots of outtakes and stuff. Ed was so popular with them that there was a place in Ohio, and he went over and spent a week in Ohio and photographed theirs and did that. And I've looked at some of them, and it's the same way that the Indians are there, and the gay 90 people are there, and it's just the same thing over and over. He became such good friends with them that I even have Christmas cards from them. So they were from the Rogers Company. Again, remember, $10,000 is what we spent to have that on. Now, this was probably one of the most uniting things that ever happened in the community up to that point. Because everybody turned out. And I remember when I first started researching this back, in the 80s or whatever, when you talk to people that were involved with it, that had a part in it or whatever, they said, it was one of the greatest times in the community because we all got along. It was like, okay, let's all go do this. We need to do this. Who can help us out with this? And he said it brought people together that sometimes butted heads a little bit, now are all coordinated in the effort. So it was a great unifying thing for the community, and talked about what a small community, what you can do in a small community that maybe you couldn't do in a larger community. Because with the exception of probably only a handful of people, everybody had something to do with it. They took ownership of it. And I think that was one of the key things. I think if I remember, Bryce, where we want to run the videos now. When I started looking for, these are actual videos of the parade itself. I'll get out of the way so you can see. They're coming up almost to where the post office is today. These are some of the people that were in the parade, some of the different, there was lots of old cars, antique cars and stuff. There were quite a few of those. Local marching bands, organizations from all the community. Again, these are all members of the community. This was the grand parade, but there were several parades. One that was just all the horse-drawn stuff was on one evening, was just totally horse-drawn stuff. The baton groups. And about collections of stuff that you could find as far as color slides, these kinds of movies and stuff, everybody and his brother have them, okay? You just got to know where to look for them, because this was such a big deal that we didn't want to forget it, so we had to do it. These are some of the local organizations, the Oddfellows Club, the Rotary Club. Every community at that time had their own marching band, so there was probably 8 or 10 marching bands here, because every community would send their own. Here's some of the firemen. I think these guys are from West Main. The horse-drawn fire wagon. Now we changed angles. We're over by where the CMA church is today, where the old First Presbyterian was. They're coming around the corner there, where the main corner. These were the Grove City Platettes, and they were the main group. They came, they had 3 different levels of them. So they bounced around here a little bit. There's our moonshiners. They're back in town. They're coming down First Street there. Now we're in the parking lot of the high school. And that's where they staged everything. The parade all ended right there. And these are some of the folks. Look at the cars in the background and the costumes that they're in. A little bit of everything. That's Pat Dunn. And this is the H.L. Moore float, which had the big butterflies on it, and a lot of the queens ended up, you can see the moniker on the corner. And this is my friend Bill Sheridan. And I just left it on there because I love it. This would be how old I'd be actually 6 months younger than he is in that. So this is how we would have interpreted the fair at that time. or the centennial at that time. So this was recreation. This is our pool. Come on now. There was no community pool. This was it. There we go. Home movies are about your kids and about the neighbors. Okay? That's what it's all about. Of course, this set of film that you saw, and there's another one we're going to run for you after that, it came from his grandfather. When I first started researching, his name was Carl Schaefer, and Carl was real good about spending time with me, and I went down one night to spend a couple of minutes and was there for 4 hours. So this is another set of film from, again, the same, you're going to see some of the same images. Here they come back up the street again. Look at the, I know you're only looking at it once, and I've looked at it many, many times, but you start to look at the buildings in the background, you start to look at the houses, you watch the people watching the parade, little intricacies that's going on. We saw that picture of him. All the color guards with the different, there's Cambridge Springs, this marching band. Okay. This is the 28th Division. This is Company B out of Meadville. This is the there's a little bit better shot of the H.L. Moore float. Little square dancing, which was very popular at the time. And remember, a lot of the times, if we wanted to do a social event, we just closed down the main street. We just threw something up at the red light on one side and down to the other side and used the street for entertainment. Each one of the clubs and organizations, again, were very, very active. This is a Rotary symbol. Rotary is started. I'm going to show you a little bit about the Rotary when we get into the part of it. The Cochran Band isn't in here, but and these are all the queens that we have. And there they are. Here come the Plaudets again. I mean, they got the article in the newspaper. They got the headline. The different kinds of vehicles, of course. I guess that's it. Okay. We're going to flip ahead now. I'm going to reset him and let him go back to the 50s production. There we go. Okay. This was an ad that ran in our newspaper, the Cochran Times. The Cochran Times is a weekly. It started back in the 1870s and went out of production in the mid-1980s. Very pro-business for Cochranton, all right? Shop here. We got what you want. You don't need to go anywhere else. Take care of your local neighbors. Take care of your local friends. 55 you already saw. This is 1966. This is a color, one of the first color postcards that was given by the community, and they were for sale for years and years and years. So just to kind of give you a little bit of orientation where you're at, okay? This would be where the Borough Building is today. The big building on the corner there would be at the corner where the truck's coming through. And notice the area that's all green there. That was the fire in 1962, eliminated all those buildings. It became a park for a short period of time because nobody could afford at that time to rebuild. So they cleaned it off and put green grass. So we had a big park in the middle of town instead of having businesses at that time. This is the Methodist Church. To kind of orient you a little bit. W.L. Dunn Construction Company is down there. And we're in the building on the top left there. That's what the theater is. So that kind of gives you an idea what the community looked like at that time. So we're going to go back in time. We're in 1955. There's Adams Street again, which is pretty much what we showed you. Now this was on the newspaper, on the outside fold of the newspaper. When you opened it up, you read the headlines, and then this business thing, and these were different things. The two funeral homes, the Graham Funeral Home there, a guy that took care of chainsaws, cement blocks, insurance. They would change from time to time, but it was kind of like remember, you're looking for something here on the thing as a kind of a reminder, and it was a great sales creel for that. Line of School of Dance, okay? ballet, toe tap, and ballroom dancing. We had a dance studio in town where you could learn to dance, mainly for the teenagers, but I'm sure there were some adults too. We had a jeweler in town. And people, the idea was to buy bread instead of, if you didn't want to buy it at the bakery, you could have bread delivered. And that's Hayes bread, and there was several that were Wonder and a couple of others. But they ran ads in the newspaper. We've got bread coming, it'll be at so-and-so's store. Don't, we got stuff coming for you. So this was a recital again. They had another place that they actually practiced it. The IOFF Hall is the River of Life. It's upstairs of that building. That's so you know where we're at, okay? Iconic building on the community, built in 1895, which is the Smith Music Hall, which is what it looked like originally. By circumstances, it was taken over by the Shorts family, and it became Shorts' Hardware in 1955. Matter of fact, this is their grand opening. It's going to be in the fall, but this is their grand opening. This is what the building looked like at that time. You can see they put windows in, and they all went ahead. There was double storefront, and they took over both storefronts, and they sold appliances on the other side of it. And he'll stay in business until 1968, when Atlantic Richfield will buy the property, I should say, destroy the building, and where you go to the bakery today, that's part of the service station they built, which was the Atlantic Station at that time. Skip Sikorsky, you might remember the name, was one of the first ones in there. This is the Cash Grocery, Mr. Leah's store. This is at the corner of, this is where Maruskas live today. Okay, it's on the corner going down to Pine Street. Now, there's going to be a theme that goes through a lot of the stores. Everybody had their thing. They had their, we're the best at. What do you think he was? Produce. You had to cart those suckers out there every night and turn around and cart them back in again. He usually had 2 high school students that worked for him, and I'm going to say that most of their work was involved with back and forth and back and forth. If you down through here, bananas 10 cents a pound, candy canes 24 in a box for 90 cents. Okay. Each one of them again had a little bit of everything. If you went into this store, if you kind of when Roosters are there, you look in the window. When you first go in, you step up to get up into where it would have been the grocery store. But all that produce would have been in the bottom portion of it. But in the summertime or whatever, they would cart it all outside so that you could choose from it, whatever. I talked to somebody that used to say, now we've all been kids one time. If you ran by real quick, you could get an apple for free. Okay. We're going to build all those homes for everybody here, so Moss Lumber Company. Moss Lumber Company, this building was situated where the storage bins are, over by where my shop is. My studio shop is actually part of the Moss, that was their production area. That's where they built things back in there. This was, you remind this is the Golden Dawn. Well, it started out, it was Moss Lumber Company's offices. Matter of fact, before, there's another little building to this side of this building, which was their original offices. And then later on they moved that. The Moss family was a bunch of brothers. This was a way a father gets his sons involved in his profession. He gave or helped established one in Cochranton, one in Greenville, one in Conneaut Lake, and one down in Sharon. They were all connected with the Moss family. So my dad being a contractor, a lot of times when you would go in, we were very good friends with the Mosses, and say, well, I need shingles. He said, well, I don't have what you need, but I'll call one of my brothers, and tomorrow morning that set of shingles will be sitting on your job site. That's how they took care of their people. This building, you opened the door and went through, you went back through the alley and went out, so you would go in here, order what you wanted. There was a side door, it took you into there, you'd go out and put it on the truck, and away it was going. Most of the time they delivered for you. Cars. We're going to talk a little bit about cars. One of the first car dealerships in town was the Griffin and Cotterman, which Al Griffin started actually selling Oldsmobiles, and then later he's going to get into Plymouths and Dodges. This is Griffin Motors, those of you that are familiar with the dealership in Meadville. They started in Cochranton. This is where they started. We're over where the gym is today. That building doesn't even look like the gym looks like anymore. But this is what was on that site. These were original buildings in the back that had been a lime spreader factory, and that later they'll move. Fire will consume a couple of those buildings, but Mr. Griffin will build his showroom here. They later became the Plymouth dealer in that. Their phone number was 1. Easy to remember, dial 1. W.L. Dunn was 5. And then he later became 52. Okay? These are, as you notice down through here, there's a lot of holiday ads, because I went to the Christmas editions at the back of, at the end of the year, the Times always ran, everybody put an ad in. And so these are ads that were all in the Christmas ads. So everybody put an ad in, everybody was wishing everybody thanks, or a happy holidays and that. But you can kind of see some of the dealership, and that's what it looks like. I don't know if anybody bought a car there. I don't know whether you have anybody here that would have bought a car from Griffin's. So. Valley Dairy. This was the logo that was on their milk bottles. The tiny little bottles that if you went to elementary school or school here, that was your lunch. There was about an 6 to 8 ounce little glass bottle, and that had that logo on it. This is across from where the health center services is today, where Bernie Wagner lives. That was where the Valley Dairy was. The Valley Dairy goes back to the 1890s. They actually delivered door to door. They did it with a horse and wagon to start with, or a horse and carriage. And the reason I know that is because after they went to delivering in trucks and stuff, the horse was still alive and lived at the farm. And occasionally the horse would escape out of the pasture. And somebody would call and say, "We see the horse down on Pearl Street." "Oh, okay, he's completing the route. He should be back by whatever." And they were never too concerned because he had the route down and he would eventually come back to the farm. The Murdicks were very active in the Grange. They lived in the property beside, and they lived in the property behind, and then later they gave the property which became the Grange, which is now a housing project. Matt's Restaurant. If you were teenagers, you surely knew where Matt's Restaurant was. Matt's was on the front street. He actually started in 3 different locations. He was on the upper corner where Turner's service station, or Anderson's Quaker State was. Then he moved over to where the Isley store, I'm going to show you pictures of that later. And then he moved back across the street on the other side. Every time he moved, he got into a smaller and smaller building. This building was probably about 15 to 18 feet wide, ran the length of the block. When you went in, there were booths along the one side, there was a counter along the middle, and there was a jukebox in the back corner. It was the kids' hangout. His menu was hamburgers, hot dogs, milkshakes, and ice cream, period. There was hardly anything else that was added to it. It kind of reminds you a little bit, if you're familiar with the Happy Days thing, you kind of go in there, downscale that by about half, and that's probably what it looked like. He's really dressed up. That's why if you do him, you probably don't recognize him, because he always had an apron on, and it always looked like he had been cooking something, okay? He made change out of it, as he told me years ago. Instead of making change with a cash register, the company, or the building he was in the first place, he had a cash register which was up against the wall of the guy that owned the store, or owned the building. And the guy could pay attention when he punched the buttons how much money he was putting in. And all of a sudden his rent would start to go up. So he got a little bit cagey. They sold cigars also. So he had cigar boxes underneath that, and he would punch. You gave him $1.50. He would punch 60 cents and put the rest in in the box, in the box, in the box. And he did the same thing similar. So when the fire happened in 1962 and the building was ravaged by the fire, it was the last one to go, they found melted coins that had been in those boxes that were underneath the thing. But he was real popular with the kids. They loved him. He supported all the school activities, and before or after the ball game, that was a place to go or a place to hang out. Here's Greenhouse. The greenhouse, as you can see, here's the front sales. This is a little bit later. This is like 72 or 73. Cliff Beers started his greenhouse back in the 1930s, and he actually started with one single greenhouse back over on North Street. And it's just cut off from where, if you just inched over a little bit, that's where they actually started. And then he built and brought the property over here. They lived in the house, and then the greenhouse was here. There was one small greenhouse to the back side of it. My dad was one of the first employees that worked there. He worked at 2 or 3 different places and worked in the greenhouse in the summertime. And then they extended. They grew their own carnations. They had all kinds of bedding plants, vegetable plants, and that. Most people in town would come, and you'd go back through the driveway and gather up the thing, gather up all your plants, and then come back out through. The front portion of it, which this is the newer portion, there was a smaller building there. All the weddings and funerals in the community had flowers from Beers. They delivered to all the funeral homes in the area and had a good business. But it was more or less a family business because all their family members were active in it. It was quite an interesting place to work. I spent about 12 or 13 years there. It was a good place to work.
What's the big vacant area there?
This? There's 2 houses here right now. This used to be a gravel pit at one time, believe it or not. This is the back section of it. North Street runs back through and up over the hill. At this time, I can't tell whether they were farming it or not. I know later on they farmed it, but my dad built 2 houses in here, and the idea was to redevelop the rest of it, which they never did. Good question. Co-op. Co-op can trace its beginnings back to 1922. Actually goes back before that, because the farmers in the town, or in the community along the area, are kind of united as a way that they could buy things collectively a lot cheaper than they could individually, and so that was the basis for the co-op. Where the Borough Building is today was the cooperative store. They had their own store there. It was almost like a general store. Worked on all kinds of things. Of course, the Grange is very connected to the agricultural farm. But this is how, when they moved down onto the bottom part of Pine Street, it started with, I think this was the first building, and then they added this one. This was a driveway that went in between them. This portion over here is the scales, so if you were buying something, you went in, you weighed your truck, and then you went back and got your stuff and weighed it again. That's where your cost came from. Of course, they're going to take this whole building and build a whole big front and add a second floor to it. If you go down there, it's similar to what it looked like at that time. And they sold gasoline, and they sold all kinds of not only products for the farm, but everybody in town. If you had a garden or you needed a few odds and ends of pipe and nuts and bolts and stuff, that's where you went, because you bought by the pound. It was cheaper. And the interesting thing there, when I worked at the greenhouse, we used to buy fertilizers and stuff, and the co-op was quite a busy place. They would come in and people would order up whatever, the farmers would come in and order whatever they needed, but everybody liked to chat. So there was a lot of storytelling, a lot of talking going on. So when we worked at the greenhouse, they would say, go down, go back around, put the fertilizer in the truck, tell them what you got, and tell them we'll send them the money, because we can't have you standing down there for 2 hours doing nothing. So, but eventually, that they would get to you, but there was 1 or 2 guys, and they were real nice, but they just didn't move at only one pace. And it was a great place to visit. Back to another car dealer, okay? Shaw's. Shaw's started on the corner. Phil Shaw, actually, which was Bob's dad, started this in the 1930s. This is what it looked like. It was one of the first that was lit at night. These are all porcelain type faces, which at the time would have been part of the Art Nouveau movement in art at that time. But that's what it started out with. This is more in the 1960s era. You can see this is the side of where the River of Life is. That's the side of their building. This is where the parking lot is today. They sold the cars actually out of the next door building, and they would bring a few in or whatever. The top portion of the bowling alley had a ramp in it, and they would bring the new cars in. Now I'm going to date myself because we used to wait until the fall at a certain time they would release all the cars. And it was a big deal. And they weren't going to show you what the 57 Chevy looked like until that day. So they would bring them in at night on covered trailers, and they would put them up over and cover them in the bowling alley. There was places you could put them up there. There wasn't only the Chevys, a lot of them did that. And then all of a sudden you're going to come, and there it was, that brand new car with all the fancy whatevers. The Atlantic Station on the corner was a place when I was a kid that you wanted to go in all the time. Not to do, I didn't have a car, but there was always something going on down there. The older guys worked there, the Dick McFarlands and those kinds of people, they worked there, and they were always up to something. Totally, and when you're a 12-year-old, they can get you to do anything. And it doesn't take a lot of effort. So we were in and out of there all the time on our bicycles. The best story I'm going to share with you is the Alice the Alligator story. A couple of the local guys went down to Florida, came back with an alligator. Alligators don't survive too well in Pennsylvania weather. So the alligator took up residence at the Atlantic Station. So when you went in the door there, right through the area, what would have been the place where the cashier was, the alligator was in the corner there. And as a kid, that was fantastic to see the alligator. So we would go in and out. Now the alligator only lasts about 2 weeks. The alligator gets sick, and the alligator dies. So most people, that would be the end of it. Oh no, we have to have a funeral for the alligator. So the funeral, the alligator has pallbearers, and it has a service at the gas station. They clean the place all up. Everybody shows up. Dave Stockton, whose father was, or his grandfather was Ed Fleming, owned the Fleming Funeral Home. They borrowed the hearse. They pulled up, they loaded the alligator in the back of the hearse. They went up. Now they got stymied a little bit. They were supposed to try and bury it in the Cockerton Cemetery, but somebody got word of that. So she is buried on the other side of the street, okay? But there was a funeral procession. They went right up the front street, right through the red light. Well, it was a red light. Kids behind them with bicycles. Big article in the paper. Cockerton has alligator funeral. Editorials. What? How disgraceful is that? You know, that somebody wrote. And Jack Donald, who was the Golden Dawn owner at that time, wrote back and said, you know, if you can't have a little bit of fun, what good are you? So it kind of set the tone. But that's what went on at the Atlantic Station in town. Now I'm going to show you a couple more, but think about this now. Every little gas station had their following. You got your car service there, you bought your gas there, whatever. So what? You hung out there. So you come home from work, whatever, get something to eat, go to the gas station, hang out with your guys, talk about sports, talk about gossip, whatever it was. So we'll see a few more of those as we move on. Turner's, okay? Turner's was, this building originally, this is it when Anderson's had it, which it looks pretty much like Turner's. But if you tear away all those panels, that was a white or yellow brick building. It was almost white. It was supposed to be yellow brick, but it was almost white. Real fancy, whatever. Built just prior to the Second World War. Maynard Turner went away to the service when he came back. I think his brother ran it for a while. And then later on, they upgraded it and put that. But again, Turner's had their, if you wanted Pennsylvania products, Pennsylvania oils and that. Lubrication, and they were one of the first places in town that washed cars. You could drop your car off and they would wash your car and detail it for you. You can't tell the Cochrane story without W.L. Dunn. W.L. Dunn Construction Company.
W.L. Dunn went into business early 1920s. I have him in 1922, but some of them have him a little bit early. He graduated from Cochrane High School in 1920. They own farms in the community, and he got deeply involved in the construction business. In 1922, when he started with horses. He had 22 horses and wagons. They were dump wagons, which meant you put the material in the back of the wagon, and the bottom, there was a lever that you moved, and it opened the bottom of the wagon, and you could spread it. And so he worked construction jobs that way. Where he was located, which is right across the street from us, there was a fire there, and desertated all that, burned all that out of there. They lost quite a few of the horses and that. He was one of the first ones to rebuild the yellow brick building, which you're familiar with if you're an old timer like I am. They built the first portion where the office is, and then this portion, then the other garages were added on later. Yellow brick, this was their offices. You went back through the hall. Later, both Jerry and Boots two sons will join the staff, so they've got offices, and WL had an office in the front corner. It was kind of an interesting place. There were little boxes, and you went, depending on who you wanted to see, and they all looked the same. They all had piled desks full of stuff and filing cases and stuff like that. Interesting place. When I got involved with working for them, it was an interesting place to go, in and out. W.L. Dunn went to work somewhere between 5 and 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. He was on the front street. Every year there was an election, he was always usually the first one to vote. He was there ahead of them. Long hours was part of W.L. Dunn. They hired a lot of people to work in the community. Of course, he didn't need them so much in the wintertime because he didn't have anything for them to do. So if you were working for him and you needed to, put coal in your stove or whatever, he would bring you the coal or whatever, because he knew come spring he'd put you back to work and he'd get his money back from you. He diversified not only into the farms, but they ready-mix concrete. This is down in the pit, which is a little ways up, a couple miles out of town. His trucks, if you remember, all look pretty much like this. They were all international because he was an international dealer, okay? His trucks were all what color? Red. What color was the cement mixers? No? Purple. They were purple. He did that so that they would be distinctive, whatever. And this was kind of one of the first squares. Now, if you were in the area moving around, Keebert was out of Meadville, and there was a big construction company up there. They ran Mack trucks. What color were their trucks? Orange, yes. So the unique thing about W.L. Dunn, coming back from when he was a horse guy, each one of these had a steel bumper on the front of them. You can't see it in the photograph. But they had a big black bumper on the front of them. Every truck had a name. They didn't double them up. When Little Brave got retired, that number went to somebody else. And as a young 10, 12-year-old with our bicycles, we all became trucks. And we would come down in the morning. All those trucks went into that building, and they were all in there. And if you ever went in there, you had to be a truck driver to get your truck out of there. There was about 18 to 20 inches, maybe, between them. And they were all packed in there and stacked in there. So we would come down in the morning when they would leave and watch them come out. This is like coming out, coming out, coming out. Same way in the evening they would come back. A little bit different because when they were working, but they'd come back and they'd all go in, and they'd close the door. Now, if you were a kid and nobody was paying attention, the door wasn't always closed, and you could scoot in there real quick, and you could look up in your trucks, and you could see your favorite truck and see the front of it, and you get to touch it and everything. And then we'd hear Mr. Dunn coming, and then we'd run and get out of there. Although he was really very good with the kids. I lived on, of course, the other side of town, which he called Brooklyn. He said, well, let's go over to Brooklyn today. So we'd have to tell him what was going on over there. So the international dealership, they also had one in Meadville also. So he was very diversified, served as the council president forever. He was chairman or president, I'm sorry, of the Fair Association forever. He died in 1972. And I didn't even have room to get up there, the trotters and that which was part of his interest in being a horse guy. Another dealership on the corner, which was the Ford dealership. This is Dave McFate has it. This is after the Pennzoil was just put in new. This was again yellow brick with curved glass in there. That was a state-of-the-art building when it was put in there. It took out 2 or 3, there was an old house in here and another house is set on the corner. Those properties belonged to John Adams, which was one of the original landowners here. And that stayed in his family almost to the very end, up until the 1920s, I believe it was. And then finally it became a gas station. Now, those of you that grew up here remember at one time there was a gas station on all 4 corners. And they passed an ordinance that you weren't allowed to drive around like this. Because they'd go from gas station to gas station to gas station and avoid the red light. So they passed an ordinance, you couldn't do that. Okay. Again, who's the group that's hanging out at the Pennzoil? Yeah, there's a group there too. They're hanging. Dave McFate, he had moved the Ford dealer down from a smaller building that was up next to where the Borough building was. They also had tanks down, which Griffin's had originally, and then later they got them down at the fairgrounds, and they sold oil around to the heating oil for your community also. Dave McFate, unfortunately, because of the 1955 centennial, died. When they were, remember I showed you the centennial when they were on the fairgrounds where they were building the thing? There was an old grandstand down there which had been part of the baseball complex built back in 1903. And they decided, because it was getting in pretty bad shape, that they needed to tear it down. And Mr. McFate had a wrecker, a big ball on the wrecker, and you go out and you pick up cars and stuff like that. So they decided the best way to do was to hook that wrecker on it and pull it down into a pile and burn it, which is what they actually did. As they were pulling it down, he was near it, and the hook portion came down and hit him in the head. And knocked him out, but he thought, well, he was going to be okay, and they took him to the hospital, and he died the next day of a subdural hematoma. So unfortunately, that did him, because he was one of the movers and the shakers in the community, was very, very active in the community. Later, his sister Elizabeth will take over, and then, of course, they're going to sell it to somebody else later. The drugstore is where Pedersen's is today. With the exception of being Pedersen's where they're at, it's always been a drugstore, clear back to the 1870s, 1880s. That's always where the drugstore was. It's one of the few buildings in town I know exactly what color it was, and it was yellow. Because all their ads said, we're in the yellow storefront. I have pictures of it with a wooden sidewalk in front of it and paved sidewalk and then upgrades to it. Well, the pharmacist is Mr. Nye, and you might know his father, you might know his son, who was Greg Nye, which was our doctor for many, many years. So when I sent him off to medical school, he came back and started his practice here. This lady was the bookkeeper, and I don't have her name right on top of my head, but this is her brand new car. For whatever Rexall was doing, the Cochranton, she won this car. That's what the picture is. They're presenting her the keys to this car because she has won this thing. So when I clip this out, this is all kinds of contests and stuff that kids could win and stuff. I don't know exactly what you had to do, but those were all the prizes. And those are some pretty good prizes. There's a couple bicycles in there and whatever. So the community was the only drugstore in the community at this time. There were some prior to that. So they were very popular. They were a popular place where everybody went to do their business also. The reason if you look in the little where the awning's coming out, this is the inside of that. This is the AMP. Now, most of the ones I talked about before were locally owned. This is a national chain. There was a big A&P store in Meadville, but there was a small one in Cochranton. Again, 18, 20 feet, length of the worm, and here's the inside of what it looked like, and the two proprietors inside. Their big thing, again, here's some of the things that they did, but their big issue was ground coffee. If you like coffee, you went and they ground it for you. It was really a special blend or whatever, so that was kind of their thing. You could get some, you can see all kinds of other things there too, but the coffee was kind of their thing. And the building, now you can imagine what the building smells like if it's a coffee store. So it must have been kind of interesting if you like that smell to go in there, because you would be flooded with that while you were in there the whole time. Again, it will be burnt out during the '62 fire. They also hired usually high school kids to cart and be the thing. Again, those of you who are younger, we don't take our shopping cart and go around. We take our note to the gentleman there and tell him what we want. And he fills the order, and then you just come back and pick it up. A lot of times you dropped it off and then you go do something else. And come back later and you pick up your groceries and away you went. Buick. Building is still down. Here's where Dignals were. They've added a second story to it. This was the Buick dealership. You can see pretty much a really, really nice building. I've been told that for whatever reason, Glenn Cheney had an in with Buick. And there were a lot of doctors and professional people in Meadville that couldn't deal in Meadville, but he would be able to get them cars in Cochranton, so they would come down and buy their Buick in Cochranton. He was really interested in the community also, real active in that. And you could, of course, you get gas and all that kind of stuff. And again, there's a group hanging out there, okay? This one, I'm sorry for the photograph, but to get what I wanted, I had to kind of enlarge something. So we're looking at this series of buildings. This is 1910, and we're in the same set of buildings right here. You can kind of see the window in that. This is Dean Weir. Dean Weir was the Philco dealer in town, which was the first televisions in the community. And he also sold radios. He also had a barber shop. The barber shop is this portion here, which is where it says shop. That's where on a harness shop you'd step up into it. Weir was again brought the first. The TVs came probably about 1950. The radios come a little bit earlier. Now, the interesting thing I always like to tell about Weir, he was a World War I veteran, and he also went to high school here and played on one of the basketball teams back in the 1920s. And great sports fan. His team was the Cleveland Indians. Of course, there was a guy from Black Ash named Clint Brown that pitched for them for a number of years. So there were several Cleveland, more so than Pittsburgh fans at that time in town. There were more Cleveland fans. So they would bring their radios out on the street and turn on the game. So I could walk up and down the street and never miss a pitch. And they were ready at any time to talk sports with you. Barbershops are notorious for, the guys going in and talking about the game and the sports and like that. So later he's going to hire another barber, and that's Rufus Work, the Work family, which is here in the community, and that's where he first started. But that's where Dean Weir was. Myers Bakery. I've talked about this before. Myers Bakery is at the end where the Cochranton Scroll was at one time. It's at the last building on the left there, it's still down there. Originally, they were in the same place, but the fire in 1928 burnt them out. And Mr. Myers, was George's father, was the baker at that time. And bakers get up at ungodly times in the morning, at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, to start the bread, so that when the rest of us get up, we've got fresh bread and rolls and all that kind of stuff. So Mr. Myers is not Mr. Myers here, but his father was always one of those who was up very early. And anytime there was things going on, a lot of times he was alerted to them. Many fires were averted because of Mr. Myers, because he was there early enough to get somebody there before the fire went in. Unfortunately, during the 1928 fire, he was in Meadville. He'd stayed over, he didn't come back, and when he got almost back to town, found that whole block had been burnt down. They were one of the first ones to rebuild. You notice, these were all at one time wood frame buildings. Now they're what? Brick. Borough passes an ordinance. It's going to be there. They all have to have if they have common walls, they all have to be made out of stone, brick, or whatever. They can't be built out of wood frame anymore. So the Myers Bakery, again, they were renowned for their breads and buns and stuff like that, but their cinnamon rolls was probably, as far as I'm concerned, one of the things that was the key. I'm sure they did it on purpose, open the door, and let that smell go up and down the front street. And if you didn't get there before 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning, you ain't getting anything. They're gone. Again, cakes for birthdays and weddings and all those kinds of things. Most of the community, if there was the firemen were having a dinner or whatever, the buns and the rolls or the pies came from there. Very active in the community and very great. And so there they are, Pearl and George. The H.L. Moore Company, World of Fame Advertising Fund. You know, the big confusion there was years ago people thought they made toys in there. Never made toys in there, okay? They were advertising specialty, which means they are products which have a sponsorship on it, which you give away to promote yourself. By the Moore comes to Cochranton with one of my relatives, William Roach. They start Roach and Moore. They're making street signs and stampings and stuff like that. They're over where the Drafto building is today. They built that. That was their offices. They're working out of an old barn in the back. They're like oil and water. He is very tight and clean and whatever. Roach is very creative. They don't get along. But they're very, very successful. And so he's much younger than Roach, so he buys them out in 1928. By 1939, he builds this building during the pre-World War II. And the production is unique because the product starts on this end and it's cut out and it's manufactured, it's painted, it's whatever, and then it goes to the shipping department out the back side. He designed the building so that the flow was down through there. Their employees were probably well over 200 people. A lot of it was done what was called piecework. So as many times as I can do it, I get paid by the piece, I don't get paid by the hour. Many housewives in town made extra money for the Christmas holidays and stuff by working for him. In the early 1950s, he brings up what's called profit sharing. A third of the profits of the corporation or the company goes back to the company. 2/3 go back to the employees. There's a formula, how many years you've worked, what your job is, how much your bonus is. At the end of each year, there's a Christmas party held at the plant itself, and they hand out all the bonus checks. This is unheard of at the time. He believed that his employees wanted to have a new car, buy a new house, have a whatever, and to do that, they needed money. This incentive was, you make the company successful, the more money you make for the company, the more money you make for yourself. And by the last couple years, there's over 6 figures is what they're accumulating and putting back into the community again. They had a waiting list for jobs. Somebody left their job or took another job, there was a waiting list for somebody to take their job. By the late 50s, early 60s, they're winning national awards. They're shipping stuff to all over the world. Their stuff went to China, he was Canadian, so a lot of stuff went to Canada eventually. Of course, in 1971, he sells out to Coinco and it becomes Morco. And of course, they were 6 months short of 100 years when they actually closed business. And the building is still there today. Isley's. If you were in Pittsburgh, Isley's is a really popular place. It's a popular chain. And it grew through northwestern Pennsylvania up through, and there were a lot of communities. There was several Isley's in Meadville. There was different places you would find Isley's, and they had a series of stuff that they sold, product-wise. The Isley's in Cochranton was located where the Country Fair is today. It's right next to where Pedersen's is. The building, of course, is gone. At this time, it was run by Gordon's. It was called Gordon's Restaurant. So their restaurant is on one side, the Isley store is on one side, and when you went inside that door, to the right was a cabinet which had cheeses and deli type stuff that you could buy. If you're from Pittsburgh, it was Chip Chop Ham, okay, which is really popular. And all the campers would come up from Pittsburgh to beyond French Creek, and we're going into Isley's to get some Chip Chop Ham for have it for lunch. But also there was, if you were a kid, they had ice cream in the barrel, okay? And it was called a skyscraper, and it was about yay long and tapered. And that was their way to ice cream. There was 40-some flavors probably. And then on the other side of it was a regular counter where you could get a regular kind of food off of it. And then there were a set of booths in the middle, which everybody hung out in. A lot of the mothers that were housewives, I hate to use that term, but would spend the afternoon visiting with some of their other friends, and they'd have coffee and that before they had to get home for when the kids got home from school. So that was their place. Gordon's Restaurant on the other side was where the Rotary met, and a lot of, like the Lions Club, a lot of meetings and stuff, informal stuff went on in there. During the Second World War, they rented all these rooms upstairs. Most of those rooms I don't think were any bigger than what the stage was. But they were just a bed, a dresser, and a whatever, because most of the people worked at Keystone Ordnance. A bus would come in the morning and pick them up. They were closed for only a half an hour. They were open 23 and a half hours a day. They were closed for a half an hour between 5:30 and 6. And they cleaned the floors and that and got ready for business again. So you could go in there in the middle of the night and get something to eat if that's what you so desire. My father, my mother, and both my grandmothers all worked there at the same time. So it was a busy, busy place. And later on, Harry McConnell will have it. It'll get badly damaged by the '62 fire, but he'll rebuild it, and 3 or 4 owners will take on it from that time until finally Country Fair tears it down, and that's the end of it. But this is the fire, or what it did to the fire. Remember, the fire's on the other side of the street. And that's how hot it was. It melted on the front face. First National Bank, again, we had our own bank in the 1870s. This is just a little bit, this was put up in 1950, and this is the inside of what it looked like with looking into the vault itself. These are things that everybody community needs, and that's what's available at the bank. So you dealt with the bank with your savings and whatever. The interesting thing was I found some material in the Christmas Club. A lot of people had Christmas clubs, so you would bring in $2 or $5 or whatever it was, put it in the Christmas Club. And then they'd have a big deal at the end. They would match you something and you get a percentage, and then it would be, Christmas is ready, come and get your money because it's time to, and then they would encourage you to go up and down the street and spend your money in the community. So it was kind of a double-edged sword. Because the fire was on the other side in 28, when this building was designed, there's no wood in this. This is all stone or metal, and that was their selling point. Your money's secure here, nothing will ever happen to it. This is where the borough was at the original borough building. This was 1939. They remodeled it. There was a double storefront there. This side became the fire department, which was formed in 1932, and this would become the borough chambers. This was a little bit of the fire equipment they had. This was their main pumper and their truck. They all came out of this garage, and there's a siren on the roof. And when you went into this little doorway, you could go back, and there were a set of ropes that hang down from there. And there was a fire bell that had come to Cochranton in the 1880s, which was mounted, and you can't see it there, it's mounted just below there. And you would start pulling them, and that would ring the fire bell so that you knew that there was a fire in town. Later it's reported by the electric siren takes place in that. But the bell has been saved. I have it at the railroad station. The windows out of the building, they're at the railroad station. So there's some stuff of it was able to survive. Again, the borough is located on the same location as it is today. I mentioned the new schools. This was up to school, this is a little bit later, but that's the new school, which was a big deal. It consolidated, took all the one-room schools, closed them, moved all the kids to town, started busing them into town. So when they moved into the high school in '54, this became the elementary school, which is the old school, located down on the corner of Pine and Smith, built in 1918, and it served until the new school, the new elementary was built in 1966, and then of course that building was leveled. So that's where the Christmas display is today if you're down there in the holiday season. With the new school, man, you talk about new school, that gym was really cruddy, that place. Now we got brand new floor, we got brand new uniforms, we have a band, they got room for them, we got cheerleaders, we got everything. It was like, wow, it was like a big explosion when you moved into that new school. So that was kind of, there might be a few familiar faces in there too. At that point in '55, these would be the three churches in town. The Catholics haven't come. They were here early in the 1870s. They're gone. They won't come back until late 1960s. But the Presbyterians, the United Presbyterians, of course, this is where the CMA is today. The Round Church is where the United Presbyterian is, and of course, the Methodist Church is the one lone church that still resembles itself there. These were all built. These two were built in the 1890s, and this one was built a little bit ahead of it in the late 1880s. We've been talking about entertainment. How did we entertain ourselves years ago without television, the internet, and all that other stuff? We're inside the top of this building, which is called the Smith Music Hall. This is the stage area, this is a better shot of what it actually looked like. And who knows? But that's a play, that's a production, that's whatever. If you wanted to be entertained, you went upstairs there. There were lectures, there were plays, there were basketball games. That was your entertainment. You didn't have a radio to turn on at home, and you didn't have music to listen to. We had a band that went around town and played, but only when they were playing were you entertained. So what else is going on up there? When the Rotary starts in 1945, they need to raise money because they're putting money back into schools and those kinds of things. So one of the first things they do is the baby review. Now this is taken inside the elementary school because they use the school facilities. Everybody in that picture is a guy. So they would dress in drag, whatever, to entertain you, okay? They were so popular, these performances, that they'd schedule for one night and everybody couldn't get there to see it or the building would be full. So, heck, we'll do it again on Friday. So they don't come back in and do it over again. Again, double the gate, whatever. Again, not acceptable anymore, minstrel shows. Very good at that, raised money again. On the stage, everybody came out and had a good time, a ripping good time. The interesting picture that I don't have here is the pictures of the crowd. You would be dressed, gentlemen, coats and ties. Ladies, you would have dresses on. That's how kind of a formal event it was. You would not come like this. You came dressed in that. And you knew these people. And if they did it a couple of nights, whatever you guys did this night, well, you guys are going to do it. So they'd say, well, just learn the part overnight. Well, of course they'd screw up, and then everybody would laugh, and that was what the point of it was, is to have a good time. The money always ended up going back to the community in some form. It was something for the school, something for the whatever. So if it works for them, why doesn't it work for the fire department? Well, the fire department does the same thing. they just scatter them out so that you get 2 or 3 out of the year. So there's one from 1939, and here's 47, and then 35 again. Most of them are, again, all members of the fire department or whatever. They would do things. This is Ed Hildebrand, played the accordion also. And again, if you flew over in 1855, the other part of the community is Sugar Creek here, the H.L. Moore Company, the Cockerton Cemetery, and the main portion of town. So that's what I'm doing for today. I want to, this is like my commercial. Okay, this is a commercial. Okay. As many of you know, I'm in charge of the cemetery. I get many interesting questions by people of not only who's buried there, but why this and why that, why that. So I thought, why don't we just tour the cemetery? So on Saturday, the May the 30th, and I'm going to have to let you know on times, we're working out times on that. If any of you have been to Gettysburg, what they have, they call the battlefield walks, where they kind of walk you through history. So, God willing, I'm going to walk you through a portion of the cemetery, and I will have transportation if you care not to walk. So we'll get Girardi's to put you in the bus or whatever. I'm going to take you through. I'll tell you the history of the cemetery, which dates back to 1859. And I will tell you a little bit about each by section of some particular notable persons that are buried there, along with why we do what we do, and hopefully answer some of the questions for you. So there's lots of room, so we're not going to do the whole cemetery. We're going to do the lower section of it, which is where Memorial Day is in the first 10 sections. The original cemetery had 10 sections and was about 8 acres. Now we're up to about 35 acres that we're using, and we have some more property on that. But we'll walk you around and do those kinds of things. Now I'll talk a little bit about Memorial Day, how it got started, why it's at where it's at, and how that got started. I'll tell you a little bit about why we have the first roundabout in Crawford County. Didn't know that, did you? The first roundabout. That goes back to about the 1863 or 4, I think is where I can do. I'll tell you what was here originally, and we'll talk about that a little bit, talk about some of the people that are buried there. So if you want to kind of put in if you're interested, that 30th Saturday is probably going to be, again, hopefully a better day than today, a little bit better opportunity to get up there and wander around. And there's some funny, unique things there that you have no idea that we'll share with you. Now, my other commercial, interesting, I don't have to, I know that if you would show up in this morning, you are interested in history, to do that. So we're trying to, and I'll do it here at the end to explain why, but we're trying to get the Heritage Society back in force again, all right? Not that it's gone anywhere, but we need some more members in that. We've just completed this new set of buildings, which is full of all kinds of exhibits and stuff, which we want you to come down, and we need you to be part of it, because I need some docents to sit down there and have the door open so people can share our local history with the area. So, you have interest in history, maybe you're interested in genealogy, maybe you're interested in sports or whatever, I got projects, okay? There's all kinds of stuff that we can do and we can talk about. Every community, Senator Bob Robbins, many years ago when he helped with some funding with that, said every community needs their quote-unquote Hall of Fame. This is ours. So we talk about our people and our institutions and why they're important to us. And so that's another reason we could use some more hands. Because in 2030, this will be the 175th anniversary of the community. Okay? So we have 4 here. Put it all together and make something maybe as big or bigger than that centennial was. Not to say we need a parade, but we need to do something to recognize our community. These are just some of the images that, you know, when you talk about the history of the community that come to mind. And we need to do that, and I need your help. So that being said, I have my wife back here, or my daughter, or whatever, that have membership things. If you're interested, put your name on the line. If there's something that you have a question or something, or you want me to meet with you, that's even better, because I'm looking forward to enlisting. If you don't want to do it today, that's fine, but keep it in your mind, because it's going to come up, all right? And through our talks and stuff, we want to continue to explore the history and share it with everybody. So look for a flyer if you went on the way out. I thank you for coming on a bad day, but hopefully I cheered it up for you a little bit, and you can have the afternoon. Maybe the sun will come and you can have the afternoon. That'll be a little bit nicer. Any questions of anybody? If not, I'm going to let you go. Oh, great. I must have did a good job then. Thank you.